I don't normally watch anime, but when I watched this for the first time on Netflix, my heart, my mind, my soul were blown, oscillating between the spectrum of emotions and ultimately landing where every story in Night City ends up. But season 2 is on the way, and I wanted to do something that I've never done before on this channel, to tell you the story of an anime, and let me know if you liked how I explain the story. As always, I do so in a way that tries to reflect a new person's viewing experience, but I will also inject some personal thoughts and get you up to speed on some more in-universe lore, so don't worry if you've never played Cyberpunk 2077. If you like the content, like and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 77k before AI takes over the world and uploads my consciousness to cyberspace, but since we're still here, you're coming with me. Welcome to
Cyberpunk, Edgerunners.
In the dazzling future of Night City, police patrol the neon streets. One wary officer sighs, wondering how his day could possibly get any worse. But then, suddenly, a man approaches him while he's in his car and with a single shot blows his head right off. As he reloads, ready to continue what he just kicked off, the surrounding officers open fire, but their bullet storm has no effect. He just stands there and fires back his own volley of bullets, chopping the officers down in half. Realizing in terror that the attacker is a cyber psycho, a mentally unstable person enhanced with dangerous cyber tech, and I'll dive more into what that is and what it encapsulates later in the video, the boys in blue know that they don't stand a chance. One cop gets domed so hard that his head explodes. Obviously I can't show it because YouTube, but they need the Max TAC team, the elite unit trained to handle such threats. The cyber psycho slices and shreds through them, but then activates an implant attached to his spine. This technology boosts his speed to superhuman levels. From his perspective, time slows to a near stop and he can move before anybody else can even blink. In less than a second, he wipes out multiple officers with ease. Just then, the Max TAC team arrives and attacks, but the psycho's reflexes were too fast. Dodging, he starts firing an onslaught of bullets wildly at them. However, there's a reason that these guys are called in whenever there's a cyber psycho, because they're experienced and equipped to handle this specific threat. So they use ICE, intrusion countermeasure electronics. Basically think of it like digital armor that has thorns. It is defensive, but you could use it offensively. For example, you could flood somebody's neural link with counter signals, short-circuiting his implant from the inside, which is exactly what they do to him. Now weakened, the cyber psycho tries to fight back, but the soldiers shoot him again and again. I feel like standing in a circle around him and firing isn't the best idea since there's risk of friendly fire, but I guess the armor is tough enough, because in his last resort, he fires at one of their heads, only for the unfazed Max TAC soldier to eliminate him. But that's when we realize everything we just saw was actually being experienced by a boy through an ultra-realistic VR simulation called a brain dance, or BD for short. The intense action leaves him buzzing with excitement. He removes the headset and shares his thoughts over a call with a Ripper Doc who provided him the BD. Ripper Docs are the underground doctors of Night City. They're like surgeons and mechanics. They don't fix broken bones, they replace them with chrome. And you go to them whenever you need cyberware or when the black market offers something that your body probably shouldn't have. Also, Preem is short for premium, used in a positive way as if to say that's good or awesome. And Choom is another word for friend. It's like saying bro. For example, it would be Preem if you hit the like and subscribe button, Choom. But moving on, this boy is our protagonist, David Martinez. He lives with his single mother, Gloria, who's a paramedic working exhausting night shifts. Their financial situation is so bad that they can't even afford laundry right now. However, Gloria is determined to give David a better life. She even enrolls him in a prestigious school called Arasaka Academy, hoping he won't have to suffer like she has. But that morning, David finds his mother asleep on the couch. When she wakes up, she tightly grips her jacket, hiding her uneasiness from him. Suddenly on the TV, some news pops up. A military-grade cyberware implant known as Sandevistan has gone missing from the body of a certain cyber psycho. David says it's Nova, meaning really cool, to see his mom on TV as she was one of the paramedics on the scene who took that body away. However, Gloria brushes it off, saying it's indeed not Nova because there was so much death there, and she sends David to school. But after he leaves, she secretly calls somebody named Maine, revealing that she is the one that has said missing Sandevistan. Meanwhile, David walks out of his home through Arroyo, a poverty-stricken sub-district within Santo Domingo, one of Night City's most neglected regions. Finally making it into the big city, we see how technology has seamlessly integrated itself into everyday human life. David also looks far off in the distance to watch a rocket blasting off. I immediately thought of Songbird from the Phantom Liberty DLC. But while David was admiring the grandeur of the promised city, he sensed something. Whipping his head around, he first notices her hair. It's white, but silvery with a rainbow gradient to it. However, before he could get a better look, she was gone. At his elite academy, he's mocked for being poor by a rich classmate named Katsuo, which I never understood. Like, what's so funny about somebody being poor? You're both in the same place right now. I think it's more funny that you and your family had a whole-ass head start, but you ended up in the same classroom. Just never made sense to me. I mean, projection, sure, but you know what? I'm getting off topic anyways. Most students here come from powerful families, but David is the only one struggling to survive. During class, when he logs into the system, it instantly crashes, but that's not the biggest issue. You see, his crash damaged the system and everybody else's Neuralink. It was because he used Ripperdoc's cracked software instead of buying the official upgrade. The principal summons David and Gloria, questioning her for not paying the licensed tech, and subtly suggests that they leave Arasaka Academy. The word subtly, spelled S-U-B-T-L-Y, for some reason when I'm reading it, like when I typed it, it was fine, but then I started reading it and I had a little glitch there. But subtly suggesting they leave Arasaka Academy. Naturally, Gloria refuses to back down, insisting that David deserves education just as much as anybody else, and promises to cover the repair costs. On the way home, she chastises David for trying to cut corners, because now it ended up costing them 10 times more. But David is exhausted, frustrated, anxious, and he's rearing to burst out of the situation that he's in. He wants more out of life, but he's chained and caged by his circumstances, and so he argues back, saying they know they can't afford the repairs and that the academy will never truly accept him. He declares he should just drop out and find a job to support her, that no kid from Santo is ever going to be a suit, that he doesn't even want to work as a corporate worker, or corpo for short. But hearing this, Gloria breaks down in tears. Everything she's done, every sacrifice, the long hours and why she's never home, it was all to give David a better future, to see her brilliant son rise to the top of Arasaka Tower. She would do anything for him. Just then, a gang opens fire on them. Actually, the attackers were aiming for a rival gang's car, but Gloria and David got caught in the crossfire. Situational awareness is non-existent here, but even after, she steadily kept the same pace and direction. Brakes might have helped. But also, why did they choose to fire right here? They could have done it before or after. They barely escape the bullets, but as the gang's target vehicle explodes, Gloria, instead of hitting the brakes, crashes right into it. When David regains consciousness, he sees his mother lying on the ground. Soon, medical arrives. David feels relieved, thinking that they're safe. However, his hope shatters when the trauma team scans them, realizes that they're not paying clients, and because they aren't policy insurance holders, they leave them to die. Desperate but powerless, David blacks out, yet somehow drags his mother to a rundown hospital. The doctor informs him that his mom's surgery went well and that she's in a stable condition, but she must stay under observation for a few days. When he asks if he can see his mother, the doc, and this is just fucking wild to me, he says his package doesn't cover it. He didn't pay enough money to be able to see his own mother when she's in critical care. Instead, they hand him a bag containing her belongings and demand payment for the medical bills. So David returns home, but only to find it's locked because they haven't paid the rent. So he sneaks in through a window and searches the place. There he discovers his mother's hidden savings account with enough money to cover her hospital expenses. Now, here's where things get interesting, because while going through her things, he notices her jacket, and inside of it, the Sandevistan. Immediately thinking about the money, he contacts the Ripper Doc to sell it, but he changes his mind when the doc offers him a disrespectfully low price. So he does some research and finds that the Sandy is a military-grade weapon, but also illegal. The next day, on his way to the academy, David runs into Katsuo and his underlings. Katsuo mocks him for being a street kid, a misfit, human trash that doesn't belong near their kind, furthering that he might infect everybody who is high society with his low-class poverty. However, that's when Katsuo begins edging him, insinuating that his mom was only able to pay for tuition because she was selling her body for money. Wanting so badly to clobber him, he taps his foot rapidly as he always did when he felt like lashing out, but he actually remained calm, trying to walk away. However, Katsuo shoves him repeatedly, and when David finally pushes back, Katsuo activates his new kung fu implant and brutally beats David with a flurry of punches, leaving him bloodied and on the floor. He laughs at him for having organic knuckles, saying that if he wants to try him again, he better come back with chrome, or just drop out of school altogether like he ordered him to. Bruised, barely conscious, and choking out blood, David receives a call from the hospital about his mother's condition. His mother is dead. The same doctor who said she was stable informs him that her vitals took a nosedive. Her body, beyond exhausted from overworking, couldn't naturally recover. But the dystopian and disheartening part about all of this is how the doc nonchalantly says, yeah, the discount package doesn't cover it, so we let her die. We took all the money you had, but sucks to suck. Anyways, here's a touchpad, you can decide how you want to bury her. Like, that is just so inhumane. And the other dark thing is, what did they do to her body? You know what I mean? They could have easily just decided to let her die, to take her organs, to sell them on the black market. David returns home, carrying the ashes of his mother and the unbearable weight of loss. But on his way home, David keeps receiving messages from the academy, the utility company, his landlord, all demanding overdue payments. Every notification is a reminder of how far his life has fallen apart. However, you know what they say. Once you're already as far low as you can go, going through hell, keep going, because you might just come out on the other side before the devil even knows you're there. He tries to sell the Sandevistan one more time, but the Ripper who offered him $10K just yesterday is now only offering him a disgustingly low $6K today. Then, as if fate wanted to mock him even further, Katsuo calls him. He starts taunting David, blaming him for his mother's death, saying she suffered just so that he could chase dreams that never belonged to him. Life is stomping David in the teeth, kicking him when his body is already broken and not even reacting to the hits. It's punching him despite his mind being crushed. It's spitting on him right where his soul used to be before it incinerated into nothingness. And at that moment, as Katsuo tells him that his mom died a boring death because she tried to live beyond her means, something inside David breaks. The pain, the humiliation, the loss, it all explodes into a flash of rage. Clutching the Sandevistan, he storms into the Ripper Doc's clinic, but this time, he's not there to sell it. He's there to have it implanted. At first, the Ripper Doc refuses. The Sandevistan is top-grade military tech, designed with a military man with the physical build of one in mind. David is just a kid, with the body of one. He can't handle it. However, humoring him, the Ripper Doc finally gives in. Since David won't sell it, he says he'll implant him, but when he comes back, begging to have the Sandy removed because of how much it hurts and how it's invaded his mind, the Ripper will get to keep it for free. Of course, he's got nothing to live for, nothing to lose, so he agrees and the doctor begins brutal surgery. Hours later, the Sandevistan is successfully implanted, and the first thing David does is return to the academy. Blood seeping from his back and through his beloved mother's jacket. Without hesitation, he confronts Katsuo, kicking him out of his seat. Katsuo gets up and says that they can't do this here because they're at school, but David says he doesn't give a flying fuck. No fucks are giving any flying lessons today. David mocks him and challenges him to fight. In response to this, Katsuo activates his kung fu implant again. However, his movements seem painfully slow compared to David's new speed, and in the blink of an eye, David lands a devastating punch that sends Katsuo flying and breaking his nose. Unfortunately, though, it also hurts David's fist. Katsuo cowers in fear and tries to threaten David by saying that his father is going to get him expelled. I don't know why it's not registering with Katsuo that David doesn't care, but he doesn't care about the academy. So he just walks away, gleefully using his new power to skip the train and just zip back home. But his smile fades as he looks at his mother's ashes and goes to bed. Later, Katsuo's father, Tanaka, who is a higher up in the Arasaka Corporation, is shown footage of his son's humiliation. Furious, he demands an explanation. His assistant, Marcus, points out that David's movements exactly match those of James Norris, the cyberpsycho who once used the same exact Sandevistan. But unlike James, David does not show any sign of mental deterioration. Believing that David is gifted with an unnaturally natural tolerance for cybernetic implants, Tanaka orders Marcus to find David and lure him in using money. He could be a perfect test subject for a certain product. But when the principal calls David, he hangs up without listening. Lost and hollow, David wanders through the neon streets of Night City. He's only 17, yet he's shattered into depression. But that's when something changes. On a crowded train, he notices a girl's reflection, somebody that he's seen before. The silver-haired girl. She's stealing memory chips from Arasaka employees, and she's fast, stealthily taking their chips without getting caught, except when she tries to take David's chip, thinking he's an Arasaka student, David catches her using the Sandevistan. Shocked, the girl pulls him aside to talk. She wants to know what he's doing there, and complains that he's messing with her work. Distracting him, she grips and pegs him, pressing his face into the door. She scans his data, realizing that he's carrying the Sandy. Seeing value in him, she makes him an offer. They can team up and steal Arasaka employee chips, and after haggling, she agrees to give him 30% of the cut. David shakes on it as it's better than doing nothing. They exchange names, and we learn that her name is Lucy. Now teamed up, it's light work for the duo. Lucy ejects the chips, David snatches them. But the overuse hits him hard. His nose starts to bleed, and he collapses. He wakes up in an ambulance beside Lucy and a paramedic. The medic says that he hasn't been taking any precautions, not using any immunosuppressants with his cyberware. And then the medic asks for his insurance, his address, his family information, but Lucy doesn't know anything about that, only that he used to attend Arasaka Academy, to which the medic says makes sense, because how else could he have that state-of-the-art military-grade implant? When they realize that David hadn't been taking any stabilizing meds to counteract the implant, Lucy bursts out laughing, calling him a maniac, because even a small implant requires medication, yet he's been raw-dogging a full Sandevistan. Suddenly, the medic points a gun at David, intending to steal the implant. Lucy, amused by this, says that David is going to have to take a 20% cut now, as she instantly kicks the stretcher into the paramedic. Laughing like a madwoman, she jumps on top of his stretcher, kicking the back door open and ejecting them out of the moving ambulance. Riding his stretcher, enjoying the thrill of swerving between cars, David just stares at her, like he's got stars in his eyes. He's got to be down bad for her at this point. I'm just saying, I love my wife, and I still give my wife this look. And when Lucy drives her heel to the floor, bringing everything to a stop, we see that David has thrown up all over himself. He groans and asks her to take him to the Ripper dock. The dock is stunned. 1, that he's still operating normally, and 2, that he fired up the Sandy 8 times in one go. He says that even grown men can't handle the detrimental effects of doing that. But moving forward, in exchange for Lucy's stolen data chips, Doc gives him just 2 days worth of stabilizing meds. He warns David to never use the Sandevistan beyond 2-3 max activations in a day, or he's going to end up as a cyber psycho. His body might be able to take the punishment, but his brain can't. However, Dave says he's never heard of somebody going cyber psycho off of just 1 cyber implant, and Doc says, well, now you have. Outside, a tired-eyed David meets with Lucy again. While talking, he's surprised that she still wants to work with him, but she states that he owes her and that she's not going to let him go until he pays her back. But proceeding forward, she invites him to her apartment and gives him a beer. Having never smoked or drunk before, he coughs. Curious about his mom's jacket, she takes it and puts it on. Standing up in front of her projector, she lights up the word Edgerunners on her back. She says it's another name for Cyberpunk, exactly who David wants to be. They joke a bit back and forth until David notices a poster on Lucy's wall talking about a trip to the moon. When he scoffs at the idea of going there, Lucy takes it personally, and so he quickly apologizes and opens up about his mother, how she worked endlessly so that he could study at Arasaka Academy, even though he never truly fit in and knew since day one that he didn't actually want to be there. Because among all people, she was the one who never wanted him to struggle in life. She believed that by climbing the corporate ladder, David could escape a semi-charmed kind of life. Naturally, her dream became his dream, or so he guesses, but then again, who gave his mom that dream? Lucy says that's unfair. He should live for his own dream and not hers. Later, when you learn more about Lucy in this video, you might even think back to this moment and make a small connection. But David ultimately disagrees, saying that he owes everything to his mother and that there was nothing wrong with the dream. Lucy falls silent, then softly confides her own dream, to leave Night City, to get away, another way to feel what she didn't want herself to know, and let herself go. She wants to fly to the moon. And that's when she invites David into a lunar BD. By the way, this is insane technology that I could only dream of, but here in the sim they share something beautiful, blissful hope, escape, and the song that still pierces my heart. And so what ends up happening is they just have fun, floating in zero gravity, driving a moon buggy, watching the Earth from a distance. For the first time in a long time, David feels at peace, and Lucy's never shown this to anybody before, never shared this experience with anyone. But with him, it felt right. Low-key, David's probably falling in love too. I mean, you know what you know. You hear it all the time, and whoever they were, it turns out they were right. Because nothing beats that perfect moment. But unfortunately, the moment is ripped away when someone forcibly pulls him out of the simulation. A behemoth of a man, claiming that the Sandevistan belongs to him as he powers up his gorilla fist. David looks over at Lucy, who's casually smoking a cigarette, as if none of this surprises her. And then that is when David gets a devastating mollywop that knocks him out cold. When David comes back, he learns that the massive man holding him upside down is Maine, the gang leader Gloria once called to sell the implants, and that's why he believes it belongs to him. And so Maine turns to his crew, Pillar and Dorio, asking how they can uninstall David's Sandevistan. Pillar shrugs and tells him it would cost a fortune to pull something that advanced out of a live body. Maine suggests icing David and taking it from his corpse, but then Pillar shakes his head, saying the cost would be the same and that the implant could get damaged in the process. Maine grows serious, glaring at David, warning him that he's in deep trouble. He explains that he bought the Sandevistan from his supplier, Gloria, but right after he paid, she suddenly ghosted him. That means the money that Gloria had, that David used for her medical bills, was Maine's money. Dorio and Pillar tease him for getting scammed, but Maine silences them. He says that Gloria was reliable. She had worked with him before, and this time she needed the money really fast. But that's when David breaks the truth. The supplier was his mother, and this explains how she was getting money for his tuition at Arasaka Academy, by clipping chrome off dead bodies and selling it to Maine. And that is when David says that his mother died due to a car accident. A heavy silence fills the room. Maine lets go of David. Even hardened mercs can feel a twinge of sympathy. And yet business is still business. Maine tells David that her death doesn't erase the debt. And David says that he'll pay it back, he insists, but Maine isn't interested in money. He wants the Sandevistan. Out of options, David offers to work for him instead. Maine laughs at first. His crew isn't exactly a daycare. He doesn't want some rookie messing up a job. Besides, nobody believes a 17-year-old could handle military-grade cyberware. But that is when Lucy finally breaks her silence, saying that they would be surprised because David has activated the Sandevistan more than 8 times today. The crew bursts into disbelief until David activates the Sandy right in front of them, taking the cigarette from one of their hands and putting it back. As Lucy watches him from the side, probably concerned about the 10 activations and impressed by his drive, he asks for a chance in their team, promising he won't waste their time. After some consideration, Maine agrees to take David as one of their apprentices, referring positively to his mother and how the apple might not fall far from the tree. Lucy goes in to hug him, but she also inserts a tracking chip into his body to prevent him from escaping. David, understanding that she runs with Cyberpunks, this crew, feels betrayed by Lucy, but she shows that she doesn't care and tells him to just go home already. Yet, on the way out, she offers him condolences. The following day, David receives a call from the academy's principal, who is overly praising his academic performance at school. He even tried to lure him in with a scholarship, which would give David a chance to return to Arasaka Academy if he just apologized for attacking Katsuo. But David grunts at this, hanging up on the principal mid-sentence. He's done with that life. Soon he receives the message from Maine to meet his group at a warehouse. At the rendezvous, Maine introduces him to another crew member, Kiwi, the team's elite netrunner. Maine explains the mission to David, Their goal is to steal the navigation data from Maxim, a bodyguard and driver for the Arasaka Corporation. They know that the guy lives for boxing bets, and so the crew takes advantage of this, rigging the fight, secretly killing the girl Maxim bets on without anybody noticing. After losing the bet, Maxim goes to his favorite bar, Jacked and Coke, to get drunk. David snatches his car keys, hands it to Dorio to make a copy of it, and they're planning to steal the navigation data from his car while he's blackout drunk. But it is not that simple because Maxim gets a call suddenly from his master who orders him to get back even on his day off. As a consequence, Maine quickly changes the plan, instructing David to get to Maxim's car with the original key while another crew member, Rebecca, diverts his attention. A quick search by the way, Rebecca is in her 20s. What ends up happening next is David and Lucy get into the car. They begin stealing the information from Arasaka's tight security. However, Maxim escapes Rebecca's diversion. Kiwi tells them to get out of the car, but they delayed for a couple seconds, believing that they could finish the hack. Now, although Lucy manages to get the navigation data, they can't get out, as the car's security systems have rebooted, trapping them inside. And unfortunately, that is also when Maxim shows up to start shooting the window. This leaves them with no choice, so Maine ordered them to run away with the car. David panics because he's never driven before, but Maine says it's time to learn now. Now is the time to show everybody what he's got, that he's got what it takes to be a cyberpunk. With fire in his eyes, he burns a hole through his ambivalence and punches the ignition. Slamming his foot on the pedal, smashing into poles, the car rockets through the colorful streets. But they're not in the green yet. Maxim put a bounty on the stolen vehicle. Within minutes, 2 bikers from the Tiger Claw gang lock onto their trail. David presses the gas harder, but they're forced to stop because there was heavy traffic up ahead. For a moment, panic takes over. He flashes back to his mother's death, which somehow gave him more fuel to refuse giving up. Using his cyberware, he drives the car over to the other side of the freeway, leaving one biker to crash whilst the other managed to follow them. David continues speeding forward, activating the implant and braking his limit with every turn to dodge the oncoming traffic, but he was also able to juke the last biker into slamming straight head-on into a truck. And so with the coast clear, David and Lucy make it to Aldo's. However, the first Tiger Claw biker appears out of nowhere. He attacks and catches David off guard, and right before he was about to kill him, Lucy steps in to save him. Again, the tiger immediately switches targets to Lucy. In response, David triggers his Sandevistan again to shove him away, but it left him vulnerable for another attack. So he raises his sword once more to slash at David whilst he's on the ground, and this is when Lucy steps in to wrap her whip around his arm to slice it up. Even though he's disarmed, he tries to attack David with his mantis arms. But with luck and the power of friendship on his side, Maine arrives and blocks the blade with his car, glaring him down. The gorilla gets out of the car and smashes the tiger in the face. However, this guy just won't die. He raises his leg, getting ready to attack with another implant. But Gorilla opens up a cannon from his arm, and in one crushing blow, he ends the fight, saving everybody. Later that night, the crew celebrates their victory with a roaring party. The air hums and brims with neon lights, music, and laughter. Maine congratulates David, acknowledging that he performed exceptionally well for his first mission and officially accepts him into the crew. But he also warns that he needs to start carrying his own weight, that he's going to be dead if he thinks he can keep relying on the rest of them to save him. Maine also gives David a fair cut from the job and a pack of stabilizing meds, enough to keep his Sandevistan under control for a month. He then explains that David's body is still mostly organic, firstly stating that his skin and bones won't be able to keep taking the kind of punishment he's been giving it, but that secondly, if he had just a little more chrome, he could have taken Tiger on himself. That is why he must invest in more implants. Suddenly, a luxury car arrives there. A sharply dressed man with more than 2 eyes steps out, and the atmosphere and the music shift. Everybody's eyes are on him. This is the same client who hired Maine's crew to steal the navigation data. His name is Faraday. He berates Maine, saying that he only asked for the information, not a stolen vehicle. He wanted the data, but he demanded discretion as well. Because of their recklessness, Tanaka, Katsuo's father, is now on high alert, and the data that they stole is effectively useless because he is no longer at the venue they were planning to hit him at. His voice is calm, but heavy with threat as he warns Maine that from now on, mistakes are unacceptable. When Maine asks for more of an explanation on everything, Faraday refuses to give him anything, talking down to him, saying that it's not his job to think, it's his job to follow orders, and right now, his new orders are to basically wait for, well, new orders, because they need time to track Tanaka again. After Faraday leaves, Main goes back to the party, but there's a really important interaction here that kind of shows how the world works in general, the order of things in the Cyberpunk universe. David asks Main who that guy was. Main tells him that is Faraday, a middleman, more commonly known as a fixer. He is the guy who finds gigs for Edgerunners, and he is the top fixer in Night City. But this is the part to pay attention to. David says, "I thought you were the guy calling the shots. I thought you ran things around here." But Main says, "Nah, I'm the guy who gets shit done. Faraday is the one with all the eddies." And so essentially what he's saying is that in this world, no matter how good you are, you're still nothing without a fixer. They're the ones who get you the work. They're the ones who get you paid. You can be shit hot, but you'll still be shit without them. And when you think about it, it kind of sucks because yeah, you're free in a sense as an edge runner, but there's still somebody above you pulling the strings. If you want to make money or earn respect on the streets, you're chained to them. It's no different than working corporate, a reminder that you're never really free in this world, that you are condemned to being below somebody and that you can't just operate above your station. But Main says don't think about it too much, to just celebrate. David, however, drifts away from the noise, standing pensively alone, yet attentively staring at Lucy with a hollow expression, as Pillar puts his arm around her and seemingly flirts with her. But that is when somebody calls out to him. David looks down curious as to who she is. Baffled, then peeved, that he doesn't know her name even after all they've been through, it finally clicks that it is Rebecca. She offers him a drink and welcomes him into the team. Just as she leaves, his principal calls asking for an update if he's going to come back, but David utterly refuses the concept. He tells the principal to pass his warning to Katsuo, that if he wants revenge, he better come and get it, and that he's not going to go easy on him next time. That is when he hangs up the call. When he looks up, he doesn't see Lucy or Pillar anymore. He doesn't see them anywhere, and he's disappointed. Later, Main sits with Dorio, and they're running surveillance on the location that was on the data they stole. But as Faraday said, Tanaka, being on high alert, moved positions. They're trying to understand what Faraday is up to, what exactly it is they're after. The pieces don't line up, but Dorio decides that they need eyes on the man and tells Kiwi to start shadowing Faraday. In the meantime, Main suggests that they do the do, but Dorio immediately bashes his face when he tries to make a move. Then she immediately starts licking the blood from his face and they start going at it, which is, everybody's got their own, every couple's got their own thing, but David calls in at the worst moment, asking if there's any work. Main brushes him off at first, saying that desperate isn't a good look, it's unbecoming of a proper edge runner. However, David isn't looking to make more scratch right now, he's anxious to gain more experience in the field. Main relents and sends him to Aldo to pick up a parcel for Pillar. On the way back, David notices two cops trading hushed fears about a sea psycho alone in Watson. They talk like it's a wave rolling in, more people tipping over the edge every single day. David, attempting to look inconspicuous, suspiciously walks by and in front of them while trying to keep the package hidden inside of his jacket with a strained face on his look on his face, As David goes to Pillar's house, he's welcomed unconventionally by Rebecca, who turns out to be Pillar's sister. Pillar is to the moon about his new golden cyber hands, flexing, posing, cracking jokes. He tells Becca to tip the kid for the delivery, and of course Becca shoots his bulletproof hand and calls him cheap, but she does tip him 500 zeni anyways. David is surprised by how much tip she gave him, and Becca calls him adorable for how new he is to the game, but she's feeling him. After David leaves the apartment, he receives a call from Lucy. She simply asks if he's free, and this guy immediately lights up and he starts running to her. Starting on that night, she begins training with David. Main had ordered her to take him under her wing, calling him a stray. Lucy retorts that it was Main's idea to keep him, but he practically begs Lucy because David won't stop hounding him for work. He needs her to keep him busy, walk the dog, tire him out and all. Lucy says that David is built like a chopstick, and that he probably won't be able to handle maybe 2 more implants. And so what ends up happening next is, while the two go on their run, it's a montage of different things that David ends up doing to be better prepared for future gigs, as well as showing some of the gigs he actively participates in. We also learn how reckless Becca can be, getting herself into situations that are less than favorable, but David is always there to get her out. We even see Rogue, a main character from the game. She chuckles and waves them both in. But back to David and Lucy, he struggles to keep up, but he does and they talk. He asks her questions like if she's actually a netrunner. For those who don't know, a netrunner is basically a hacker in the cyberpunk world. somebody who jacks into the network and steals data, controls systems, or kills people through cyberspace. They're like people who can dive into the internet and do basically anything they want, if they can. Lucy, just like Kiwi, is a netrunner, but David wonders how old she is because of how skilled she is, to which she practically says you shouldn't judge people based on their age and that nothing beats hard work. When he asks her if she and Pillar are messing around with each other, she says no, that he has a tendency to get inappropriate, but that she just gives him a little fry when he does, just to keep him off. Surprised that David was able to keep up on the run, she tells him that she can't keep holding his hand and that he needs to start working out himself. So she gives him a training plan for him to follow, which he does. And so David gradually becomes part of the crew's rhythm, taking on missions, paying for mistakes along the way, seeing how everyone does things. Dorio teaches him to box, Maine teaches him how to drive, and he would even try to give him a gun, but David is against it, saying that his Sandy and fists are enough. However, he ends up taking it anyway, just in case. Becca would teach him how to shoot, but for some reason, remembering his mom, he can't bring himself to. He would also hang out with Pillar, who would take him out and show him the nightlife. However, circling back to a conversation with Maine and David, Maine would ask how things are going along with Lucy, and of course, David, being shy, denies anything. But Maine, in fact, the whole crew has eyes. David admits that nothing's happened. He's into her, but she's just not into him. But Maine laughs at the fact that he can't see that she does like him, even astounded to hear that she took him on a lunar BD. Maine says that is as romantic as it could possibly get in Night City, that she took him on a date to the moon. That she's never even told anybody that that was her dream. David then asks how long Lucy's been running with the team. About a year, he says. She was recruited by Kibi, who thought she was naturally talented, but Maine says if he wants to know more, that's something he's got to ask Lucy. As time presses on, David gets more implants, trains more, learns more, grows more. David likes how he's become an integral part of the team and how they have become a significant part of his life. You know what they say, friends are the family that you choose. On one particular night, however, while they were all out, everything was good. Everything seemed good. However, in Night City, good never lasts long. They come across a man pissing, making noise, and mumbling out loudly to himself. At first, he might seem like just some homeless man who's off his rockers, but there's something not quite right with him. Annoyed, Pillar yells at him to be quiet. The others tell him to just leave the guy alone as they continue walking, but Pillar continues anyway. And when he gets close, still barking in the guy's face, saying that this isn't his turf, and that is when we see his eyes. That familiar cyber-psycho flicker where their pupils twist and glitch like broken data. It's that split second where you realize that the machine inside of him is starting to take over, and that is when the energy shifts. Maine senses it, turns around, but it's too late. And I really want you to lock into this scene here because this is actually going to be one of the biggest turning points for David's character. So, what ends up happening is the man suddenly turns violent, putting his hand under Pillar's chin and blowing his head off in a flash. The guy goes full cyber psycho. Pillar's head bursts into a mess of metal, flesh, and wires, and David freezes where he stands. His Sandevistan activates automatically, but his mind shuts down. This extremely traumatizing moment is happening for David at a slowed pace, and meanwhile he is absorbing all of the visuals. The world slows around him and he's unable to process what just happened. His body's survival mode instinctively kicked in, I should say, but his brain still hasn't caught up yet. The brutal attack happens way too fast for his brain to keep up, because you gotta keep in mind that before this, David had trouble even pulling a trigger. He didn't want to use a gun. Gunfire is what caused the car accident that killed his mom. And yeah, you could say that he wasn't really a stranger to death and violence at this point, but I think it's the moment at which it happened and who it was that got blown to bits that shatters his psyche. Because literally a few minutes before this, he was relishing the peace of being with essentially a new family for him. And even though he didn't really necessarily like Pillar, he was still part of the same crew. And watching him just get busted up inches away leaves David paralyzed. It was the first time that David actually saw something so visceral happen to somebody who wasn't a no-name. It was something that happened to somebody in his inner circle. This is a psychological freeze response, one of the body's automatic reactions to trauma. With David, as mentioned, it was a literal system shock. It occurs when a person is overwhelmed by extreme stress and the mind disconnects from the action. The absolute and overwhelming horror of the attack, the sound of the gun, and the fragments of Pillar's body. Jesus, I mean, it's a disgusting sight. They really good animations here, but the fragments of Pillar's body, his head, create a sensory overload that floods David's system. This experience connects directly to his earlier trauma, when his mother died and he was powerless to do anything. That memory remains freshly buried but still active, and this new event forces it to resurface. Both of these exact moments in David's story share the same elements: sudden death, helplessness, and the loss of somebody close. His mind links them automatically, and the emotional fissure deepens and widens. And so as a consequence, this moment is so significant that it becomes another imprint on his persona, reinforcing the feeling that no matter what he does, he cannot protect the people around him. For him, he is always going to view himself as powerless, and he's going to want to fight that. It marks a turning point that shapes how he begins to view violence and control later on, and we're going to see the person he eventually becomes later, but it will make more sense when you understand what led him to that specific point. But okay, picking up back with the situation at hand, the cyberpsycho has fired directly at David, who is not moving yet. And Maine is screaming in his ear to do something. Shit's going down. Fight, flight, and you choose freeze? But Maine manages to kick him out of harm's way. Rebecca gets emotional because that was her brother, but also because she was the one who was supposed to kill him. It's kind of twisted, but the cycle took that from her. And so without caring about her life, she starts firing her guns at him, running up to him and firing at him. This forces Maine to order Kiwi to knock her out before she gets herself killed because of her blind rage, which I also think is kind of funny. They have a protocol for this, for their own teammate, because they know how reckless Becca can be. So they have something called Rebecca's lullaby for these specific events where she becomes a little bit too much, and they're like, all right, she's got to go to sleep. I thought that was funny. But on the other hand, when Maine tries to fight back using his hand cannon, it glitches and it fails. Lucy attempts to burn the psycho's synapse down, but it's not enough, and the man attacks her. Now, seeing his love bug in danger, David does not hesitate. He activates his Sandy, rushes forward, and the ambivalence that he had to fire a gun is no longer there. He wants to protect Lucy. His mother's smile flashes before his eyes, and he shoots the man in the head for some Red Dead redemption. But even that doesn't finish him. David makes a mistake by not double tapping, and then he turns his back on the enemy. Lucy notices, but David doesn't see the gun that just got pointed at his head. However, Maine finally steps in and delivers the killing blow. His head rolls, and Becca blasts his head to mush before firing another shot at her brother. Maine says he's going to stay back with Kiwi to inform Night City police about what events transpired, and he tells everybody else to go see a Ripper. Once Lucy is medically cleared, David drives her home. Lucy is quiet, and even though David is happy to be alone with her, he is uneasy by her silence. And when they get to her apartment, Lucy stops David at her door and doesn't invite him in. Probably tired and dealing with a lot internally as well, but David still wants to spend time with her. So she agrees, taking them to the rooftop. Before them, Night City. Under the moonlight, they talk. She tells him that she was being honest about her dreams. When she turned him over to Maine and the gang, she wanted to explain herself, but she didn't. She held back because she thought David was angry with her. David admits that he was at first, but he isn't somebody who holds grudges. He says he wouldn't have saved her from that cyberpsycho if he still resented her. Then the conversation shifts. David asks why she doesn't think that he's a good edgerunner. Lucy tells him that's not what she thinks at all. She already knows that he's a good cyberpunk, but she also knows that he wants to be legendary. And in Night City, that's where the problems begin. The cost of becoming a legend. The price of having a drink named after you. Because what you need to understand is cyberpunks don't get remembered for how they live, only for how they die. To gain a mythical status, you have to be absolutely insane. There are many good edgerunners, there are many great ones, but only the craziest and wildest ones become the stuff of legends. But then Lucy tells him something that he doesn't fully understand. She says, this isn't the life or the end that he deserves. She believes that he can have a happy ending, but that's exactly why she's scared. Because she's seen where this path that they are both currently walking on together leads to, and she doesn't want that for him. And so she's caught between her feelings for him and the reality of the world that they live in. It's an emotional moment, warm and sad at the same time, because anybody who knows Night City knows how rare happy endings are. It isn't the place for them. However, David continues and says that they're the same. But Lucy shakes her head. No, she says. This is it for me. This is all I have and will be. We are worlds apart. The words don't make sense to him, and he asks how. How are they not the same? And this is going on while a rocket launches into the sky in front of them, lighting up the night, creating and reflecting this buildup of increasingly pent-up emotions and unspoken truths. Lucy looks away, breathes in, and grabs the back of her head because she's finally saying the things that have been gnawing at her whenever she would watch him having fun or drinking at the bar with the team or watching him from the side, talking and exuding bravado and ambition. She admires him, but she is afraid that she is going to lose him. But this is when David breaks the silence. Essentially, what he ends up saying is, I don't care that you think this is it for you. I'll be the one to give you more, to be there for you, to be there with you. I'll give you everything. Your dream. I will give you the moon. I'll fly you to the moon and we'll swing among the stars. Lucy, overwhelmed, just lets her body take over, and she rushes over to him, into him, and kisses him. She sits on his lap, holding his face, and David is stunned. Like, is this really happening? You know what that's like, your first kiss with the love of your life. And Lucy tells him not to die on her. She's terrified of losing him. But David promises that he won't die. But that fear, that quiet doubt still stays, because in their world, Lucy knows essentially promises don't and literally can't hold much weight. No matter how much somebody wants to keep them, Night City doesn't let anybody have that kind of control. And so now Lucy has somebody to intimately care for. Her deepest fear is the city consuming him and tearing him out of her arms, whether she realizes it or not. David has already become her moon. The next day, Maine offers Pillar's cyber hands to David, but he refuses, saying that he can't afford them, and besides, they're not his style. David continues that his eyes are set on Maine's own cyber arm instead. Maine chuckles and promises that if he ever dies, David could have them, and how that should give him enough time to bulk up. However, then he senses something different about David's vibe. He goes, "You and Lucy did it, didn't you?" David, embarrassed that he's been caught, kinda keeps quiet, but then Kiwi, who was in the ice bath, deep diving trying to find any info related to Tanaka, comes out. By the way, I should explain this for those who don't know. When a netrunner does a deep dive into cyberspace, their cyberware and neural links start overclocking, which raises both system and body temperature. The strain on the brain and the nervous system is insane, so they need to keep physically cooling their body to prevent them from overheating. That is why sometimes you'll see them submerged in a tub full of ice. It's literal cooling, just like how a PC needs a fan or coolant to keep it from frying. There are also specialized cooling suits and immersion chairs that professional netrunners use to regulate their temperatures during dives, but they are expensive and not always accessible. For most street runners, a simple bathtub full of ice is the only affordable option. But picking up back with Kiwi, she can't find anything there, as Tanaka has buffed up his security. Maine gets surprised when she talks about David's past, specifically about his time at Arasaka Academy, where he was in the same class as Tanaka's son Katsuo. But Maine is in disbelief that David even walked the same halls as the Saka kids. However, Kiwi explains that he is now a dropout, despite having straight A's. Maine goes, "Oh, that makes sense as to why his mom always needed so much money, his tuition." But what ends up happening next is Kiwi finds Tanaka has a deep and disturbing obsession with certain brain dances, more specifically with the works of someone known only by the initials JK, and David immediately recognizes the name, Jimmy Kurosaki, the BD editor who made the cyberpsycho simulation he was watching at the start. A lot of his fans constantly come back to him because of how fast and how high quality his BDs are. But David also explains that he tailors his edits specific to customers' as kinks, their special predilections, to ensure that they can feel everything, whatever their flavor is. And in order for JK to do this, the customer has to go in person to see them. Tanaka is going to be there with JK in person, and he's going to be there alone. because he's definitely not going to let anybody else see his bespoke fetishes. Fetishes? The crew then plans to kidnap Tanaka when he visits Jimmy's studio again. However, their first part is to get their hands on Jimmy, who had a reservation for one over at Embers, which, by the way, don't go see Hanako at Embers. Do anything but that. Main game reference. While the crew keeps an eye on their target, David parks his car near Jimmy's and plays the role of an excited fan, striking up a conversation. But Jimmy isn't easily fooled. Just as Maine moves in to grab him from behind, Jimmy spots him using a cybernetic eye at the back of his head, and he instantly unleashes an EMP blast, knocking out most of the crew's systems, especially Kiwi, who is more chrome than Ganic, causing her to barf. JK quickly takes David and escapes the building to his studio. Only Lucy and Dorio, who were out of range, can still operate, and they follow him in their car using the tracker they inserted into David earlier. Lucy is pissed that her Pookie Bear is in danger and immediately wants to go zero JK. Zero is another way to say kill him. When David wakes up, he finds himself inside of a building filled with dead bodies scattered all around. Panic sets in as he has no idea what's happened or why he's holding a gun. But just then, 2 police officers burst in and, seeing him armed, accuse him of being a cyberpsycho. David tries to explain that it isn't what it looks like, but suddenly his body starts moving on its own and he shoots both officers dead. Stumbling outside, David realizes that the entire building is surrounded by police. He runs, terrified. But each time he encounters an officer, he fires without thinking. It's like his body is operating on its own volition and homie's got no control. At one point, a freaking mantis blade ejects from his arm and he decapitates a man in a single strike. He's a cyberpsycho now. Then Max Tack arrives. They open fire, riddling him with bullets, but that's when heavy weapons burst out of where David's arms and legs used to be. The soldiers call him a freak before shooting him point blank in the face, but suddenly, the world flickers, and it turns out it was a simulation. Jimmy Kurosaki had trapped him inside of a brain dance. David is hyperventilating and can't calm down. The experience of murdering and then dying was far too real for him to even conceptualize that it was just a BD. David calls him a psychopath. Of course, Jimmy just laughs and then explains how he always manages to get these cyberpsycho simulations. It's because all of the military implants come with built-in brain dance recorders, and people pay a good amount of money for such stuff. When he talks about David Sandevistan, he says James Norris, again that cyberpsycho from the beginning of the show, was the one who wore it first. Ominously, he whispers in David's ear saying that he can't wait to get a brain dance off of his memories. But then he compliments David for still being sane after wearing it. However, furthering that no matter how strong you are, the side effects will eventually drive you mad. And when that happens, JK will be there to capture it. David thinks he's special, the exception, not the rule, that he will not become a cyberpsycho. But Jimmy's heard the same thing from every cyberpunk before him. So he restarts the simulation, forcing David to relive the nightmare again. Suddenly, Dorio and Lucy storm into the studio, warning Jimmy not to play games or he will die. Lucy rushes over to David's side, breaking him free from the BD, but that is when Jimmy's armed drones activate, opening fire. While Lucy hacks into their systems, David darts through the chaos to draw their attention and buy her time. Jimmy, seeing Lucy's incredible hacking skills, finally surrenders. Impressed, he agrees to cooperate with the Edgerunners and help them with their plan. Maine leaves David to keep watch over Jimmy. Jimmy asks David if he has seen how James Norris went psycho and died. And then he asks, despite seeing that, why he still decided to get implanted with the very same cyberware. Norris was a soldier who lived and breathed chrome, whereas David was just a kid. But he explains that he feels that he is built differently, as if the implant has always been a part of him. However, Jimmy just gives him a dark smile and says that is what everybody says, that every cyberpunk either becomes a psycho or he dies. Or he or she dies. There is no happy ending. Later, Tanaka arrives at the studio to meet Jimmy, but instead, he walks straight into an ambush. Maine and his crew surround him, but when Tanaka can't call for help, he unleashes a barrage of needles that erupts from all over his hands, and he puts up a decent fight, even giving Maine the handjob of his life. But David intervenes, giving Maine the opening to knock him headfirst into the floor. However, in that chaos, one of Tanaka's needles leaves Jimmy throated. He starts suffocating, smiling, and then lets out a faint... I tried to keep a straight face for that last one, but Jimmy gets throated, then he starts suffocating, smiling, letting out a faint laugh, looking at David before dying. David stands frozen, Jimmy's words echoing in his mind. But moving forward, the team quickly grabs Tanaka's unconscious body and escapes the studio before trauma response arrives. But what we end up doing next is picking up in the memory of Maine. He is in the desert and he's running. This is before he's gotten big and buff and everything with all the chrome. He's getting a workout in. But that is when Maine of the present day gets snapped back to reality. Now, we kind of noticed it earlier, before when his cyberware was starting to act up a little bit more, but something is not right with him. He seems to be losing grip on things, even struggling to hold food. Dorio says that the chrome is starting to push his sanity to the edge, and she insists that he needs to take some chrome off after all of this to reduce his load. But of course, he waves her words off and injects himself with immunoblockers, saying that he's fine. However, when he turns to look at her, he doesn't see Dorio. He doesn't even see the place that they're actually in. His vision changes, and he sees David back in the desert where they had that conversation. Things are starting to spiral. Maine's got the glitch in his eyes. Cyberpsychosis is taking him. But he just gets angry and he tells Dorio not to worry, that he's got no limits, and just like David says, it's not gonna happen to me. But moving forward to the warehouse with Tanaka beat into a swollen pump, Kiwi is inside of Tanaka's head, trying to extract critical information, but his ice is strong and she's having trouble breaking through. But right in the middle of her dive, something happens. Her mouth goes flying off of her face and she is sent flying out of the tub. Okay, real quick, for those wondering why she doesn't have a mouth, I looked it up on the Cyberpunk fandom website. I don't know if this is official lore, I just did a quick search, but before she became a mercenary, she was working at a brothel, and one of her clients brutally attacked her and ripped away her jaw. Yeah, Cyberpunk. I don't know if that's official, but I thought I'd share it. But back to what happened, she goes flying out of the tub, and all we hear are hits landing and Dorio screaming at the top of her lungs to tell Maine to stop. Maine has done something bad. His bloodied hands tremble, his vision blurs, and he keeps blacking out. He lost control and he doesn't even realize that he severely damaged Kiwi. He remembers nothing. In fact, he thinks that they got hit. That's when Falco comes from the side and gives him a Falco punch. David and Lucy were just hanging out at the apartment when they got a call and were told to come to the warehouse, but Falco didn't tell them much. However, when they arrive, they finally learn that Kiwi is out of commission. Not dead, just knocked out. But they also learn that Maine's condition is progressively deteriorating. David is stunned, hearing Jimmy's words. Every cyberpunk either dies or goes cyberpsycho. Doesn't matter how special they think they are. Okay, so I want to take some time to explain what cyberpsychosis is in more depth to contextualize and hopefully give those who don't know a better understanding as to why there is so much dreadful gravity in being afflicted by the cyber rot. Let's start talking about what psychosis is in the real world. So, psychosis is a term for a collection of symptoms where a person loses touch with reality. During a psychotic episode, the mind becomes so disrupted that it can't clearly separate what's real from what's imagined. People may experience hallucinations like hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there, or delusions, which are fixed false beliefs that don't line up with reality. Speech and thinking often become disorganized or confusing, and behavior can seem erratic or out of place for the situation. This state can appear in many different mental and medical conditions. Schizophrenia, for an example, is one of the most well-known examples, but psychosis can also appear in severe mood disorders. Somebody going through manic or depressive episodes might start to believe things that aren't true, or they might start misinterpreting reality entirely. Outside of mental illness, psychosis can also be triggered by brain conditions like dementia or even from external causes such as drug intoxication, withdrawal, or extreme stress. Now, in real life, an example of what this could look like would be somebody convinced that strangers are actually following them, or they're hearing a voice giving them orders even though nothing is actually happening. I do have some other psychology videos going a bit further into all of that, but for now, that's pretty much what you'd want to know on a rudimentary level about psychosis in the real world. But in the world of Cyberpunk 2077, there is a fictional disorder that mirrors this idea. However, it ties it directly to technology. Cyberpsychosis. It's said to happen when a person replaces too much of their body with cybernetic implants to the point where their mind can't handle it anymore. The brain starts to lose grip on reality, and the more they augment themselves, the more detached they become from humanity, eventually becoming more machine than human. And when that breakdown reaches its limit, they often turn violent, attacking others as if they were defective machines. You see this throughout the game in side missions called Cyberpsycho Sightings, where you track down heavily augmented people who've completely lost their minds. Cyberpunk turns this idea of psychosis into something technological, a warning about what happens when the boundary between human and machine finally breaks. And I honestly can't stop thinking about the ship of Theseus. It's a classical philosophical thought experiment. For those who don't know or would like a recap, it goes like this. Imagine an ancient ship, perfectly preserved in a museum. But over time, its wooden planks start to rot, so the caretakers replace them one by one. Eventually, every single part of the ship has been replaced. Now the question is it still the same ship? But then, it even gets trickier. Suppose somebody gathers all the old, discarded planks and rebuilds the ship elsewhere using the original materials. Now there are two ships of Theseus. One made entirely of new parts, and one made of the originals. Which one is the real ship in that case? Now, of course, this doesn't really get explored much in the anime, but it definitely does in the main games. However, that's a story for another video. But in the context of Cyberpunk 2077, this question surgically cuts into the core of that philosophy. When someone keeps replacing their body parts with cyberware, eyes, limbs, organs, even parts of their brain, at what point do they stop being themselves? If their memories, thoughts, or emotions start breaking down, does the person still exist in any meaningful sense? But, the word meaningful, it's subjugated to prerogative here. But essentially, that is the philosophical root of cyberpsychosis. Just like the ship of Theseus, you're still walking, talking, and thinking, but how much of you is still there if you're more Chrome than Gannic? When you're more Borg than man, and you start viewing organic people as lesser beings, for me the question becomes then, was it worth it? That was a huge side tangent, but definitely a conversation worth having if you're into the whole cyberpunk lore. But picking up where we left off, David tries to follow up with Maine in an attempt to comfort him, but Maine lashes out, slapping him aside and snarling that David only got lucky with the Sandy, which was supposed to be his. Maine sits alone in a room thinking about how he's made it this far without any problems, so for him, there's no way he's going to downgrade now. But while this is going on, Dorio and Lucy are in a heated argument about continuing where Kiwi left off. Lucy knows that she needs to finish what they started because Arasaka is watching, hunting them, and she is the only one capable right now of completing the mission, of finding out Arasaka's secrets. So Lucy pulls David aside and tells him that he needs to tell her that she needs to do this, and she agrees to do it, but only if David stays by her side and Maine stays out. Speaking of Maine, he is rapidly deteriorating. Dorio would find him in the garage, mindlessly wandering and almost walking into a wall. While Lucy preps to dive in, David would ask her why she hides her neural port. But she doesn't respond to that, and she simply jacks in. Inside of Tanaka's mind, she recognizes that there's traps all around, but she manages to purge a way forward. Outside, Dorio and Maine think of a plan if Lucy doesn't make it. Just then, Faraday calls, demanding the data. Maine tells him that they're working on it, but the schism in his mind is growing at an exponential rate. But back with Tanaka, things start to go wrong. When he wakes up, mid-hack while Lucy is still connected, David tries to knock him out again. But that is when Tanaka suddenly says his name, which catches David off guard. Lucy is rushing, the immense pressure building as she wonders why David hasn't knocked him back out yet. Shocked, David is frozen. Tanaka claims to know him well. He pleads for his life, warning David that Militech is using him and that Arasaka is going to come for everyone, ultimately saying that if David wants to survive this, he should help him and contact Arasaka to stop this madness. However, Tanaka's sudden awakening destabilizes Lucy's dive, causing glitches. However, she still manages to break through walls and find the location of the information. Meanwhile, Tanaka keeps trying to convince David that the crew is just using him, but David says Arasaka would just use him too. Tanaka retorts with something very important that speaks to the overarching dystopian theme of cyberpunk. And pay attention to what he says here. He says that he doesn't get that no matter what, someone will always be using him. That all roads lead to the megacorpos. It doesn't matter if it's the Japanese corpos, Arasaka, or the American corpos, Militech. David will forever be in their shadows. It does not matter how much David accomplishes, how much money he gets, how high he flies. He will never be able to pierce the veil that separates him from the upper echelons of society, and he will never be able to escape the cage that they put him in, that they have everybody in. Effectively, Tanaka is saying that you will play their game whether you want to or not, but if you do serve, you might have a little bit of a better time. But back to Lucy, she starts downloading the files and suddenly finds a whole file on David. Checking back in with Dorio, she's injecting Maine with a bunch of stabilizers to get him functioning again. They rush to David and Lucy, shocked to find Tanaka is awakened. Before they inject him with the tranquilizer, Tanaka suddenly gets electrocuted. Now I don't know for sure, but I believe that Lucy was the one who electrocuted Tanaka and killed him here. But what ends up happening next is Dorio quickly disconnects Lucy from Tanaka's mind, and David takes her out of the tub. Maine slaps the crap out of David for letting Tanaka wake up and stay awake, which, yeah, I get, it's valid. But also, if it was my lady's life in danger, fuck whatever Tanaka's got to say, keeping her safe is prio number one. However, David bites back, saying how if Maine hadn't punched Kiwi out and forced everybody into this, there wouldn't have been a problem. However, Tanaka's flatline has sent a signal to the trauma team, meaning they are going to have to escape before it's too late. David carries Lucy to the car while Maine and Dorio try to grab Tanaka, believing he's still vital for the data. While trying to free him, when Maine fires his gun at the chains that they tied him down with, that gunfire alerts the trauma team, who then notifies the 5-0. Then Lucy finally wakes up, wondering where Dorio and Maine are. David says that they had to bring Tanaka's body, so they're still there trying to retrieve it. But that is when she tells David the awful truth, that there was no point in trying to bring Tanaka's corpse, because there was no useful information in his head. She's keeping the truth about David's file under wraps. But it is too late. The police storm the building and a brutal firefight erupts. Hearing the chaos, David tries to rush back in, but Lucy grabs him, refusing to let go. Dorio and Maine are already surrounded. It's a death trap with no way out. Lucy clings to him, terrified that he'll die if he tries to go back. But David doesn't want to leave them behind to die, and her reaction feels strange, so he figures that she must have seen something in Tanaka's mind. And then he starts to softly wonder out loud if Lucy was going to tell him that she believes in him the way that he just said that he believed in her. Then, in a flash, he takes off in a yellow blur. Inside, Maine and Dorio are fighting for their lives. Maine's mind breaks again. He imagines he's seeing Faraday and blows his head off, but then glitches back to the desert. Caught in this trance, he's about to get shot, but Dorio puts her boot to the cop's head and kills her. That is when the cyberpsychosis takes over. Maine starts firing at Dorio, who's trying to get him with a suppressant, but Maine shoots her point blank. Dorio was able to inject Maine just in time for him to come back and see what he'd done, and to see Dorio take a bullet storm to the back as her lifeless eyes started looking in opposite directions, splattering Maine with her blood. This causes Maine to snap completely, asking if this mess is his fault. Blaming himself, he goes full cyber psycho, letting bodies hit the floor, ripping Tanaka's corpse off and using it as a club to murder everybody in sight. And this is probably one of the most terrifying scenes in the entire season of the show. Maine, drenched in blood, towers over one of the medics and goes,
"Hey, is this my fault?"
with one of the most psychotic looks on his face before twisting the poor dude's head off. The police immediately call for the Max Tac team. Lucy is sitting in the car alone, her head down, desperately trying to call David, but he doesn't answer. The trauma response team, in fear for their life and their client dead, with no reason to stay, leave the NCPD to deal with the cyberpsycho who was mowing them down. Now, as the trauma team tries to leave, he throws an explosive canister at their air vehicle and blows them all up, which is pretty freaking scary. Like, just imagine that scenario. You think you're right on the cusp of leaving, and you just see him come out, and you just know that you're cooked. It's insane. And the NCPD are just regular cops having to fight a murderous machine. They don't stand a chance. Just then, David reaches the scene. Maine shoots a bullet that scrapes his face, asking if he's doing okay. He appears to be calm for the moment, throwing Dorio's body on a pile of canisters which seem like a pyre in his eyes. He wants to give her the best funeral he can. David says they got a Delta, meaning they got to dip, get out of Dodge, but Maine says no. He's got to face his Reaper, Max Tac. Watching Maine prepare for his final stand, he decides to fight alongside him. However, he's terrified and can't stop shaking. David knows how this ends. He's seen it play out before. He knows how it feels. Hearing Max Tac arrive, That threatening hum sound of them prepping to land strikes fear into the chambers of David's heart. He wants to save Maine, but he hears their footsteps approaching. But Maine stops David, giving him one last slap across the face, saying he's done enough and that it's time for him to go. He's fast, so he just needs to keep running. Maine has accepted his fate. Right as Max Tack storms in, Maine shoots the altar of destruction and triggers a massive explosion. David sees this devastation happen in slow motion. He feels some of the force of the explosion, and it's a pain to see Maine get melted. Lucy, still ringing, with a dead stare on her face, hearing that explosion, then silence, remains unmoved, unable to accept the fact that David might be dead, that everybody she knew was dead. But then, a burnt David rushes into the car, fetal position, hugging Maine's arm. Lucy drives them back towards the city, silent, broken, older. David sits in the passenger seat, clutching Maine's severed cyber arm, the only piece left of his fallen mentor. A year has passed since that tragic day. David is now the leader of the crew. He's upgraded himself with several new implants, including cybernetic legs and Maine's own cyber arm. The team now consists of Kiwi, Rebecca, and Falco. Lucy left the crew after the incident. One day, they're out on a mission with a new crew member named Julio. He's a big fan of David, who has now made quite the name for himself. Soon as they arrive at their destination, they find the house is heavily guarded. Kiwi scans the place remotely, pinpointing every person inside. David, Becca, and Julio break in, finding themselves surrounded by armed men. A woman steps out and orders them to leave before things get ugly, but Kiwi quickly hacks into the enemy's neural links, frying their circuits in seconds. They drop dead before even pulling a trigger, but that is when more come out. David moves fast through the chaos, firing precisely and dodging bullets. Once the ground floor is clear, the team heads upstairs. Blocking their path stands a huge man, muscles packed with chrome. He glares at David and taunts him. Julio points his gun and wonders out loud if the man is even human. But David lowers Julio's gun and steps forward to take on the challenge. He pulls his shirt off, revealing how much of his body has been replaced with cybernetics and how much he's bulked up. Using the Sandy to launch himself at the enemy, the brute, surprisingly, reacts with the same speed, nearly crushing him. But David is still faster as he slips behind and drops a load into him. The man crashes to the ground, lifeless. Julio cheers and steps forward, convinced that the mission is done, but as he walks ahead, he brushes a laser tripwire. It triggers instantly and kills him. Occupational hazard coupled with a newbie mistake. Moving on, David opens a gate full of kidnapped people. He calls out for an Isabella. One of them slowly raises her hand. He tells her that her grandfather sent him to bring her home. She stays calm, barely reacting, but is relieved. After rescuing her, David receives a call from his fixer, Wakako. She commends his work, praises his skills, and assures him that they'll be in touch if a new lead comes up. Later, the crew winds down at a bar. Rebecca dances without care, while David and Falco sit in a corner, sharing a drink. David slides Falco his cut, and they quietly talk about how far David's gone and how he's going to fly higher than Maine ever could. Kiwi is lingering nearby, admitting that at first, she wasn't sure that David had what it took to lead. But David compliments her skills for being the city's best netrunner. However, even Kiwi admits that Lucy is a better runner than she is. She asks if David has contacted Lucy about returning to the team, to which he shakes his head no, claiming that he's given up on her. Lucy has not been the same since the incident. Kiwi also says that she hasn't spoken with her since either. Becca then walks over and asks David why he's hanging out with Kiwi instead of joining the fun. She tells him to dance and enjoy for a bit, but David excuses himself and heads over to the Ripper Dock for some maintenance. As he leaves, Kiwi shouts at him that she doesn't do well at just playing friends. She likes him, but it's unrequited. Kiwi says to Becca that she might want to try another approach, and Becca scoffs, asking if she should be cold, distant, and nerdy like Lucy instead. At the dock shop, the Ripper is adjusting his implants, suggesting that he upgrade his arm to the next gen already, shaking his head in disbelief. David's practically still a kid, but he's now chromed from foot to dome. He says to David it's insane that he hasn't gone cyber psycho yet, considering all the hardware he's packed onto his body. But David just smirks, saying he feels like he's built for something bigger, because no matter how much chrome he gets, he doesn't feel anything. In fact, the chrome feels more natural to him than his own skin. Now to me, that lack of feeling could be the first crack in the foundation. Taken at face value, he could just be talking, riding the wave of how far he's come without any issues, but I think it's more than that. I think this is more of a widening gap between who he was and who he's becoming. Each upgrade gradually dulls his senses across the board. The more metal he adds, the less he seems to connect with his humanity, hence the whole I feel nothing bit. It also makes you wonder if this is how cyberpsychosis really begins, through a slow erosion of empathy. I'm just saying. Maybe David isn't immune or resisting cyberpsychosis at all. Maybe he's already in it, mistaking the numbness for evolution, thinking he's becoming stronger when really it's just evaporation. But David thinks he's special, to which Doc cackles, saying he must be Atom Smasher 2.0. But David doesn't know who he is, so Doc tells him. Atom Smasher is a fully cyborged boogeyman who is a legend, an absolute unit of a monster who gained his renown at first by winning the Fourth Corpo War, but his mythical status has only risen as he's currently working for Arasaka, filling entire graveyards. By the way, I looked this up out of curiosity while writing this script, because admittedly I'm not the go-to guy for cyberpunk lore, but I just learned that Smasher is indeed a cyberpsycho, but he's a high-functioning one who doesn't mind working for Arasaka since they keep feeding him bodies. He just happens to love killing. Suddenly, David gets a call from Kiwi asking if he can drop by, as she wants him to meet some guests. David heads straight over there, and it was Faraday who was waiting for him. Faraday greets David with his usual slick confidence and lays out a major job offer. High pay, high risk. The job involves Arasaka's rival corporation, Militech. Faraday makes it clear that this is David's chance to prove himself, to step into the role that Maine once filled. David accepts the mission, but then Faraday adds one more demand. Lucy has to be on the team. But David explains that she's left the crew. Faraday still insists, and he says to try convincing her. David pauses but agrees to reach out. When David asks him for more intel, Faraday brushes him off as he always did with Maine. Later, David returns to his high-rise apartment, and Lucy is there, welcoming him home. So she's been here the whole time. I misread the translation, I guess, or for some reason they're just not telling people, but she's there. They're living together. They relax on the couch, talking about their day. David brings up the team, wondering if she's ready to come back. Lucy shakes her head, saying that she still needs time. He then asks if she did any net running. To this, she gives a faint smile, admitting that she did a little. And then she grabs her jacket, asking him to come with her. So they hop on a bike and speed out of Night City, the neon skyline fading behind them, out in the dark where the light doesn't pollute the sky as much. They stop at a quiet lookout beyond the city. Staring at the desert horizon, David admits he's never left Night City before. Lucy gazes at the distant glow and comments about how the city looks like a cage of light. David tells her he wants to know more about her, about where she came from, about what she meant when they said that they were worlds apart. Lucy takes a deep breath, and then she starts to open up. She explains that she was born in another country. When she was a child, Arasaka agents captured her and took her to a secret facility. Along with 13 other children, she was harshly trained to become an elite netrunner for the purpose of working for the biggest megacorpos out there, or so that's what they told them. The training was brutal. They spent every single day connected to machines, forced to deep dive and reach the old net. But some of you guys might be wondering, what is the old net? What is Lucy talking about? Let me explain. Long before the events of Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which takes place in the year 2076, the world had a global network similar to today's internet, but far more advanced. It connected governments, corporations, cities, and artificial intelligences. That is what the old net is. However, over time, humans lost control of it. Megacorpos like Arasaka and Militech used it as a battleground, sending hackers and autonomous programs to attack each other's systems. But there was this big collapse, an event known today as the data crash, caused by a legendary netrunner named Raish Bartmoss. He released a self-replicating virus that spread throughout the entire network. It corrupted data, crashed systems, and set artificial intelligences free. Most of the world's digital history was wiped out, and so much information was lost there as well. Power grids, financial systems, and databases collapsed. As a result, the global net became unstable and unsafe for human access. Now, in response to the data crash, in order to contain the fallout, an organization called Netwatch created what is called the Black Wall. This massive digital barrier designed to isolate the corrupted old net from the safer, rebuilt networks that came after it. Everything beyond the wall, the rogue AIs, the destroyed data, the autonomous code, it's still active but uncontrollable. Inside of the old net, programs continue to evolve without supervision, And something else to note here is that some of the AIs have become violent and predatory towards human minds that try to enter. This is why netrunners like Lucy are afraid of it. She and other kids were part of an Arasaka experiment that forced them to dive near or beyond the black wall to search for usable data or secrets hidden in the old net. Most of them never returned because the rogue AIs mentioned straight deleted them. Only Lucy and a few other kids survived, but what she saw left her traumatized. But back to the story, eventually, the remaining kids began to question why they were dying for somebody else's dreams. Why were they dying for Arasaka's ambitions instead of chasing their own dreams? Sound familiar? The kids made a plan to escape. One day, they killed the guards who simply couldn't stand a chance against them, and they ran. But as they were running, more guards came and started to take them out. Lucy sprinted through the chaos, never looking back. She remembers waking up later in a garbage dump, barely alive and somehow finding her way to Night City. Her voice grows unsteady as she finishes. David stays quiet, listening. The glow in Lucy's eyes reflect both the trauma she carries and her deep link to the net. But that's when, just like Maine, David's hand starts to shake. Lucy is naturally concerned, but has this look on her face that says, "I know this is bad for you, but I've learned to accept that I can't change or stop you. I hate that I can't save you, and it hurts to love you knowing what's coming." At least that's how I interpret her facial expression. But as they hug, she receives a signal. She is alerted that somewhere in the city, a netrunner has restored Tanaka's data, which Lucy originally deleted. But still, he is not able to restore David's data. What he does know is that a very skilled netrunner has intentionally and very precisely manipulated it, leaving no trace. However, before he can look further into it, as he's leaving the Arasaka facility, his screen suddenly flickers. Something is tearing through his system. He turns around to see somebody there, but it's too late, and even though he attempts to fight back, his body convulses as his brain fries from the inside. He collapses lifelessly onto the floor, and from the darkness, Lucy steps forward, revealing that she's been keeping David safe from the netrunners. And she fucked that dude all the way up. Lucy is on another level. I kind of wonder how she stacks against Somi and Alts. Actually, never mind. As I said that out loud, I kind of answered it. Lucy is brilliant, but she operates at a lower capacity, whereas Songbird went global, had state-of-the-art tech, and Alts, well, she straight up transcended. What do you guys think, though? But the story continues in an Arasaka laboratory. Two corpos are trying to figure out how someone was able to breach security and kill people within their facility without being caught. Unable to find anything, they think they might be able to make headway by involving Night City fixers. One of the corpos is hesitant because the runner who infiltrated them could be working with one of the fixers, who might then turn around and try to sell the info to Militech. That is when the other corpo retorts with the universal truth of this world, that even fixers are glorified lapdogs subservient to megacorporations. If they try to screw with Arasaka, they'll get the stick. And that is when we cut away to Faraday, who gets ambushed while he's out on a ride. He manages to escape and informs Militech, the megacorporation he's been working for, about what happened, knowing it was Arasaka who put the hit on him. But he just gets talked down to, basically being told that he's on his own, that they won't protect him, that he's been messing up, especially with the whole Tanaka thing, and that he's got to make all of this work by himself or they're not going to pay him. Now, what ends up happening next, seeing that Militech wouldn't help him, is Faraday tries to make a call to somebody, but in that very moment, those Arasaka corpos have him pegged, calling him a good boy for doing as they planned, because now they know that the fixer they're looking for is him. While this is going on, we find Lucy, who's woken up by David watching TV. He can't sleep, and this is when he sees an ad for a ticket to the moon, seeing that it costs $250K, thinking it would have cost more. But Lucy tells him that's just the price for one person, one way. Leaving him, she notices his hand is still shaking, but she goes to bed. The next morning, Faraday is meeting with the Arasaka Corpo, who says that they'll let bygones be bygones. The suit starts talking about the cyberskeleton, the top secret research that Arasaka's been trying to track down. But then he mentions a runner who is likely connected to everything. He's referring to Lucy. This runner has been thwarting their attempts to recover the data that Tanaka had on the cyberskeleton, and also mentions that the runner's skills and tactics don't reflect that of somebody who's working for a corporation, so it has to be an Edgerunner. And this is where Faraday comes in, as he is the top fixer in NC and probably has the best idea on who the runner is, or at least finding them. Of course, he says he doesn't know anything, But when the corporal offers him 1 million for him to bring that runner in, or just half if it's only their head, Faraday smiles and quickly agrees. So now we cut away to a conversation between Lucy and Kiwi. They talk about David and how he's leading the group, to which Kiwi admits he's doing a prime job, but how the crew could still use his handler, Lucy. But Lucy says she needs to do something first before coming back. After they hang up, Faraday shows up at Kiwi's door. But that is when we shift over to David and Becca doing what they're good at. Except in the middle of their firefight, David sees the look on one of his enemies' face. He instantly starts seeing the memory of another woman who had the same look of fear, but in that moment of him freezing, he almost gets shot. But Becca saves him just in time. David is just in a stupor and can't register what happened. After the mission, the two go on a walk and she asks him, "Hey, what's going on?" Real friend type thing. She knows something is up. Despite David trying to brush it off, Becca explains that she watches him harder than she's ever watched anyone, and then tells him that he needs to go light on the chrome. She says to him, "I got your back, no matter what, but do you remember the fight in the alley with that cyberpsycho and my brother? I don't want to see you end up like either of those two." But that's when we see Lucy, who's woken up to an alert notifying her that Arasaka agents are diving and looking for information, so she gets into the ice to spy on them, and luckily they don't find anything. While this is going on, something is really going wrong with David. He's remembering a mission in which he killed 2 Arasaka scientists. The first one, he blows his head off, but nightmarishly, weapons start to burst from his head, so he freaks out and keeps firing. He's going absolutely mental, and hearing someone from behind him, he immediately whips around and shoves his gun in her face. With a crazed look in his eyes, covered in blood, the woman is petrified by the psycho murderer she sees before him. And this is the same woman he saw in a flashback when he was on that job with Rebecca. She asks why he's doing this, but in David's reality, guns are starting to burst from her face. In fear, he blasts her away. Kiwi finally reaches David over comms and he tells her that he took care of everything, but as he was leaving, he sees a picture. The woman he killed was a mother. Outside of that memory, and back in the apartment, David, with a fractured mind, is staring at a picture of him and his mom before falling to the floor. Lucy rushes him to the Ripper doc. The doc, who is smiling and hovering over his valuable body, asks when the cyberpsychosis symptoms started to show, continuing that he should have addressed it earlier. Everything is catching up with him. He may have been able to fly higher than Maine did, but you should never fly too high. Your wings might burn off. That is when we start to see what David sees. Doc, with his horrific dozens of eyes, greedily peering down at him, warning that if he doesn't stop pushing his limits, there's no saving him. Enraged, David snaps, grabbing the now relatively normal-eyed Doc by the throat and demanding stronger meds instead. That is when Lucy wakes up and sees what is going on with David's eyes. That glitch. She intervenes, pulling him back to his senses. David then realizes what he was doing and he says sorry. But the Doc doesn't take it personally. Handing him even stronger and more meds than usual, he says that this is the last time that they'll see each other. He just knows it. And then he reminisces a bit, saying that yesterday David was just some kid pushing BDs for some scrap and today he's about to become legend. Lying on the ground, Doc melancholically says, "Time for the next dreamer." Outside, Lucy begs David to accept that his body and mind are deteriorating. The argument turns heated. She tells him that no matter how strong he thinks he is still human, and humans have limits, so she wants him to slow down. But David refuses to listen, convinced that he's built different, that he's special and destined for more. But Lucy knows that nothing will ever be enough for him, and she can't bear watching his wings eventually burn off. She tries to bring him down to earth by saying that he's not actually that special, that he has a higher tolerance than others, but that's effectively it. He's not immune. David finally opens up about something that's been eating at him. He talks about the woman he killed, the mother, the Arasaka scientist. She reminded him of his own mother, and she had a son too. He confesses that he's killed so many people at this point that he's lost count and grew numb to the feeling. He also mentions that he didn't expect Lucy to leave too when Maine and Dorio left, to which she says she didn't want to, she had to. David then asks her to come back to the team, but Lucy refuses again, saying that she has to do something first, just can't explain what. So he suggests that they break up and go their separate ways. But Lucy immediately jumps and explains that that is not what she wants to happen. But in that moment, Lucy senses something. Now, we don't know what it is, but there is some sort of red dot that she notices and it's coming from cyberspace. Immediately, Lucy says, "Sorry, David, I have to go." She tells David to wait for her at home and that she will return soon. She leaves David, rushing towards the location of the signal, determination in her eyes, and soon she finds an Arasaka netrunner in the middle of a dive. She moves in for the attack, but this time it backfires. It was a trap, set to capture her, but the ones behind this were Faraday and Kiwi. The following day, David and his team are on a mission in the desert. Standing under the scorching sun, massive trucks approach in the distance. Faraday has assigned them another job, to hijack those trucks and deliver the cargo to him. Inside, it is the Arasaka's cyberskeleton, but David didn't know that he was being used by Faraday and that this is a trap. Moreover, he doesn't know that Lucy's been kidnapped, which is kind of weird because if my girl didn't come home, and she said she was going to come home, to wait for her to come home, and she didn't come home, I'd be concerned, but apparently David's not. And so what we do is we go back to a little bit before this present time with a conversation between Kiwi and Faraday to learn how they got to this mission in the first place. Faraday has access to the data that Lucy stole from Tanaka, including David's corrupted files. Said files suggested that David's biology was unusually compatible with the Sandevistan, which is why Tanaka wanted to use him as a test subject for experimental runs. Arasaka ultimately believes that David's unique physiology potentially makes him capable of handling the cyberskeleton. Fiwi and Faraday, talking about Lucy, remark how much carnage she unleashed, even ultimately causing the deaths of Maine and Dorio, which I don't necessarily agree with, because Maine was already off the deep end, but I digress. The point is, they say that Lucy's killed so many people just to protect David, and David didn't even know that she's been saving him over and over again for over a year. Kiwi also reveals Lucy's secret to Faraday, that she used to be part of the Arasaka Corporation, doing deep dives into the old net to mine data, which is why she's able to hack complex systems with ease. Faraday tells Kiwi that Arasaka will pay handsomely for Lucy's capture, and that Kiwi will also get her share of the rewards. However, Faraday's true sights are set on climbing through the ranks of the Saka Corporation. Faraday says to trust him, though Kiwi always believed that in Night City trusting anybody is a mistake, that it always ends in death. Still, she agrees to work with him. And that is when, moments later, Faraday calls David, offering him the high-stakes mission. David calls in his team for an emergency meeting and explains that this is going to be their biggest job they've ever done. Extremely high rewards, but extremely high risk and heat to match. Of course, everybody agrees, including Kiwi. However, David is regressing at an exponential rate. The cyberpsychosis has effectively handicapped him so much that he can't even stand or breathe normally without multitudes of huge immune blockers strapped to his body. Like, it is seriously debilitating. Rebecca decides to call the gig off, but David insists and asks her to keep quiet. Okay, so now switching back to the present timeline in the desert, the mission's setting off. Faraday has hired another crew to hit the trucks first, but soon Arasaka soldiers step out and they start destroying the decoy Edgerunners. Another team storms the convoy, splitting the trucks apart with a violent assault. David waits for the right moments and orders Falco to move out. So they launch their first assault, flipping over one of the trucks with sheer force. But that is when one of the trucks swing behind and open fire upon them. Becca tells him not to use the Sandy, but it's David, so you already know how that goes. His implants surge with energy and he leaps into the enemy vehicle, killing everybody inside with a burst of gunfire. And so what happens next is Becca plants the explosives on the last truck that has the cargo. David rams the other truck into it, causing a gigantic explosion, and he makes it back to the team. However, the truck is unscathed. The armor is too strong and the ice is too powerful for Kiwi's abilities as well. David goes into brute force and jumps onto the truck, only to find that there's no driver, just an empty seat. Far away, inside of Arasaka Tower, they're watching the operation live while on a call with Faraday, who is now working for them as a double agent. Everything is running smoothly. The endgame plan is simple. Make sure David puts on the cyberskeleton suit. However, to do this, he leaks to Militech that the Saka convoy with the cyberskeleton suit is out there, and of course, Militech mobilizes immediately to go and try and nab it. But the other thing is, this is also part of Arasaka's greater plan to observe and extract data from a field test. They want to see David use the suit against Militech. But moving back to David's team, they're continuing the pursuit. Rebecca urges him to retreat, but David, who's got rivers of blood flowing out of his nose, is determined to stop the truck before it plunges off the cliff. And in this moment, David starts talking to himself, saying, "Now what, Martinez? You're right on the edge." Thinking fast, he orders Falco to fire a grappling line from the vehicle. The hook zooms in front of the truck. And in a colorful motion array, David stands, smiling and continuing to monologue with himself, saying, "It's time to cut loose and remember that you are special." So he races ahead, grabs the cable, brings it to the front of the truck, and then wraps the rest of the cable around a massive boulder to anchor it. Then, channeling every ounce of power from all the cyberware in his cybernetic body, David pulls with relentless force, and in this exact moment he tells his crew to slam their brakes too, wrenching the Arasaka truck off balance and flipping it violently, sending both trucks crashing. However, nobody gets hurt. David looks at his hand, proud that he did it again, and their mission is almost complete. As this is happening, Arasaka has sent an airship to pick Lucy up from Faraday's hideout. Back in the desert, Kiwi is busy trying to crack open the locked truck. While she does that, David tries calling Lucy, but obviously she doesn't pick up. Falco starts putting his hand to his chin, thinking about how off the situation is. Why would an Arasaka vehicle of such high importance not be manned? It was relatively too easy, and then he starts looking around. Now that the dust has settled, he goes, "Damn, this would be a perfect spot for us to be ambushed right now." Becca says he needs to stop acting like a little biatch. But that is when they spot two of Arasaka's trucks coming towards them. But before anybody can react, both explode in massive bursts of fire. From behind, a small Militech army comes rushing forward, shooting at David's crew, and they brought artillery. Enough to start a small war, and they start raining explosions down on them. Falco concludes that Faraday set them up and sold them out. Right on cue, Kiwi finally manages to open up the truck and get everybody inside. They finally found the cyberskeleton, the research that Arasaka's been conducting. Becca asks if this is like David's Sandevistan, but Kiwi says this thing is several degrees above his Sandy, and you can already hear the gears turning. David is probably thinking that fate has delivered this to him. Back to Faraday, he connects a wire to Lucy's neck and dials David's number. Using Lucy's voice, he tells David to step into the cyberskeleton, warning that if he doesn't put it on, everybody will die. At first, David hesitates until he hears Lucy's voice say, "I believe in you." But that is when he knows something's up, because she wouldn't say that. He knows somebody is after her and he prepares to don the suit. Kiwi hands him the controls, but Becca snaps. Installing that kind of cyberware means certain death. David ignores her, saying that it's the only way out of the situation they're in, and he begins the installation anyway. Kiwi steps out to check on the situation and Falco follows her. The suit stabs into David and begins to synchronize with him. Outside, however, the Militech soldiers seem really quiet. Suddenly, Kiwi knocks Falco unconscious and escapes. She contacts Faraday to report that her job is done. Faraday says Militech, who doesn't know that Faraday is secretly working in cahoots with Arasaka, is expecting her. This explains why they're just sitting there, but Kiwi is free to go ahead and leave. At that same moment, Lucy regains consciousness. She quickly kills the guards, attacks Faraday, doesn't finish the job, and escapes. She calls David, telling her that Faraday set them up and that the cyberskeleton is a trap. She tells David that he must not implant the cyberskeleton no matter what. But it's too late. The suit has already taken his body. The only flesh parts we see of him are his torso and head. His arms and legs have become the suit. David doesn't understand what's going on. His heart begins to pound as her words echo in his head. But before she can get far, Faraday hacks into her system and fries her neural link, causing her to collapse to the ground. Barely conscious, Lucy gasps for breath. Faraday, his shoe on Lucy's head, opens a video call to David, smirking as he reveals his betrayal. Rage floods through David's system. His vision flickers, his body trembles, and this time it's not just his eyes that begin to glitch. His entire body begins to show the chaotic, distorted overload. David is shattering. Colors flicker violently and we see him split into triples, as Becca watches this horror unfold, saying that he's going psycho. He screams that he's going to kill Faraday, but Faraday only mocks him, saying that he doesn't think David is special at all, only that Arasaka sees something in him. David's wrath spirals out of control. His cyberware overheats, pushing him to the edge. However, before he loses himself completely, Becca slams a stabilizer into his chest, bringing his vitals back under control. David says Lucy's in trouble and that he needs to save her, explaining that they've been double-crossed by Faraday. Just then, Falco drops down, telling them that Kiwi has betrayed them. Becca promises to zero her once they get out of this. Speaking of, as soon as Kiwi passes by Militech, the army moves in for the rest of the team. They fire missiles and deliver Kingdom Come, but as the dust clears, David can be seen standing, locked in on the cyberskeleton. With crazed, murderous intent on its pupils, the monstrous machine powers up, It moves like lightning and charges straight into the Militech's army. The cyberskeleton, combining its powers of magnetism and gravity, along with the speed of the Sandy, start ripping and tearing through soldiers and shredding metal with unstoppable fury. Rebecca and Falco watch from the truck, frozen in disbelief. It's a one-man army, but the toll is immense. His systems overheat, his muscles twitch uncontrollably, and blood spouts from his mouth. It is unfathomable levels of strain that this amount of cyberware use outputs. It's absolute insanity and completely inhuman. That is why only individuals with an abnormal amount of resistance to cyberpsychosis could have ever even been considered for this weapon. But it's like at this point, just build a machine that does all this. David, as special as he is, can't keep this up. The longer and more he uses, the more detrimental the effects exponentially multiply. And we can even see the cyberskeleton starts pumping stabilizers into him every second just to keep him alive and sane, but hardly. Yet he keeps fighting. When the battlefield, which now has become a hellscape, finally falls silent and every Militech soldier lies dead, David turns to his friends, exhausted, shaking. Taking another injection, he tells Falco and Becca that they're going after Faraday to save Lucy. Falco nods, Becca smiles faintly through the chaos, agreeing that no matter what, they'll do this together. While David and his crew race towards Arasaka Tower, Militech soldiers relentlessly chase them. Unfortunately, David has pushed himself far beyond his limits. The meds that keep his cyberpsychosis at bay are becoming less and less effective with each dose. For now, he takes a nap, leaving Falco and Rebecca to fight against the Militech assault. They speed through the city, blasting away their pursuers, but now Arasaka's teams have arrived, determined to capture their weapon. David remains unconscious, but in his fading mind, he sees memories of himself walking around the city, and then he hears Dog's final warning. The meds he's been taking on suppresses but doesn't erase the effects of the chrome, and soon, what he's been trying to push back will eventually slingshot back the other way. When he takes the last vial, it will be the end of him. The cyberskeleton injects another dose into David, and he goes outside of the car and unleashes his power, terminating the enemies in seconds. A manic laugh bursts from David as memories surge through his mind. He's hallucinating. The day he dropped out of the academy, his mother's wish to see him stand atop Arasaka Tower. Rebecca, with a sad look on her face, knowing what is happening, quickly injects another dose steadily into him, but at this point there's no turning back. The meds have become ineffective, and Becca continues to listen to David talk to his mom about going to the top of the tower. So she just smiles and says, solemnly, "Okay, David, let's go to the top then." Meanwhile, as Faraday meets with Kiwi under the guise that he's going to pay her cut, he instantly shoots a bullet into her heart and betrays her at last. He coldly remarks that it's part of his contract to eliminate anybody who knows about the cyberskeleton, but Kiwi isn't finished yet. With her dying light, she short-circuits his arm and makes a desperate run for it while two of his gooners go after her. Back with David and the crew, 5-starring through Night City, they see 3 MaxTac ships, 3 of them, coming straight for them. With all the destruction going throughout the city, Arasaka can no longer contain the situation and keep hush-hush about the cyberskeleton. They regret working with a fixer to try and do things discreetly. Watching the chaos spiral out of control, they decide that it is time to end David once and for all. Since no ordinary soldier can kill him, and not even MaxTac, she says the legend Atom Smasher himself will be the one individual who can. She furthers that the cyberskeleton was originally designed with him in mind, so it's only fitting that he be the one to destroy it. But that doesn't really make sense to me, because if Adam was the one that the skeleton was made for, why not just let him do the tests and run tests on it? It doesn't really make sense to have some random person or go through all the trouble of trying to find somebody to put the skeleton on when they just had Smasher right there. But picking up back with a psychotic David, he tears through MaxTac forces like it is nothing, which is crazy because if you fought MaxTac in Cyberpunk 2077, they're really hard to kill. Granted, I'm not like the best player when it comes to any kind of game, I'm just honestly okay. Mostly there for the story, but still these guys are tough. So for David to be wrecking them in seconds is insane. But when the MaxTac commander learns that Arasaka is sending Atom Smasher, they retreat, leaving David standing amidst the wreckage. And he's also down to his final injection, the last dose that will mark his end. Even David laughs, saying that his luck has finally run out. Just then they receive a call from Kiwi. While hiding from Faraday, she tells them about the situation. Before dying, she gives them a live location of Faraday's ship and says that Lucy is with him. But soon Faraday's goons kill Kiwi. However, not before she blows up one of their heads. The crew, fast and furious, launch their truck into the air to attack Faraday's ship for family. Faraday flies away, but dude doesn't know that he's cooked because David has hitched a ride. At Arasaka Tower, one of the corpos talks to Adam Smasher asking how it feels to face the cyberskeleton. However, Adam only thinks of it as a child's toy, like it's not even worth his time. The toy that took out an army, to him, is a toy. Soon Faraday's ship arrives at the tower. While David is standing at the top, telling his mom that he's made it, he's right on the precipice of irreversibly becoming a cyber psycho in totality. Right below him, Faraday is at the entrance with Lucy, and in the middle of them talking, David suddenly appears and frees Lucy. She opens her eyes, and he says her name with death in his voice, cyberpsychosis in his eyes. Everybody is petrified and speechless to see that David is there. They raise their guns, but David takes them and kills all of them. However, Smasher shows up at the very last second to save one. David crushes Faraday's leg with gravity and says that he doesn't get to die yet. And then he turns to come face to face with Adam Smasher. The two stand off. David gets in his face and says, "So you're Adam Smasher in the Chrome, NC Boogeyman of legend." Smasher mocks him, saying, "You're packing some heavy artillery for your size, boy. I'm surprised you can string two words together." But David doesn't back down. He doubles down and glares into the boogeyman's red laser eyes and says, "Likewise, Choom, heard you went no organic full Borg, so I gotta ask, any brain left in that chrome dome of yours?" With a mechanical voice, Smasher responds, "You could say I'm special." And David instantly retorts, "Well, so the fuck am I." But then, David spots Faraday trying to escape with the trauma team, and a flash of memory hits him. When they didn't have insurance, so the trauma team left him and his mother to die. Wrath-filled, he starts bellowing to go after Faraday, but before he can act, Adam Smasher shoots him in the stomach, reminding him that he cannot afford to be distracted right now. This pain and shock causes David to lose all control. David rips out with a scream and unleashes his Sandy at full power, tearing through the trauma team in a blur while holding Lucy. And man, the song is playing. I'm teary-eyed, I'm not gonna lie, it's such a high emotion moment. But Smasher isn't done. He activates his own Sandevistan and fires a rocket that slams into David, hurling him out of the tower. David's vision glitches, wide-eyed and gone. His body and mind are fracturing into dust. As they're falling, wind blowing upward, as David is being torn apart, Lucy leans into him, calling to him, and putting her hand on his face, begging him, "Please, come back to me." And in the cold of the moon, she kisses him, and he does come back. As they fall through the neon haze, Lucy whispers that she never wanted any of this. She just wanted David to live and be with her. This is the exact thing she knew was going to happen, the future she couldn't prevent. But David says it was the only way he could protect her from this damn city. He regrets the fact that there were so many he cared about that he couldn't save. He says he doesn't matter anymore. He has nothing left except her, so he isn't worth saving. But then he goes on that her dream is what matters now, and he tells her, "My dream is for you to have yours." But their moment is interrupted by a barrage of bullets as Smasher is coming down on an elevator next to them. David jumps and rolls away, but he's not getting away. Soon they manage to find Falco and Rebecca, and for a very fleeting moment, it feels like the crew is almost whole again. David clears the area of soldiers and asks Falco for one last favor. But as Lucy sits into the truck, Adam Smasher comes crashing down onto Rebecca like a meteor. The impact sends everybody flying underground, and Rebecca is smashed. Falco tries to attack Adam in a desperate move, but in vain as he gets slapped aside and loses his arm. David steps in to fight again, surprised that Adam has a Sandy too, but Smasher says it's a basic implant and that he doesn't care that David is the main target. He's gonna kill all the flesh bags anyway. That is when David's limited human form betrays him. He starts coughing up blood from his mouth, so Smasher smashes him into the ground, taunting that he's out of meds. Lucy tries to hack Adam Smasher, but the monster doesn't even flinch, and somehow he grabs the connection. I don't even know how he does this. Like, how are you going to just straight grab the link through cyberspace in the physical world without, you know what I mean? Like, just breaking the connection like that. Lucy, Elite Lucy, is astounded, wondering how he did that too. But that is when Falco drags Lucy into his car and speeds away, keeping his promise to David. However, Smasher locks onto them, saying that nobody leaves the slaughterhouse. But before he can destroy the truck, David uses his gravity attack to hold him back. But after that, what ends up happening next is Smasher, offended that David even considered that he could challenge him, rips him apart piece by piece. He is completely obliterating him. He mocks David further, saying, "You can't even stand without your anti-gravity implants. You think you're special?" As David is getting crushed by the weight of his own very cyberware, Smasher puts him in his place and crushes any semblance of an idea that David had to make him think that he was special. Effectively, Adam is saying, "I'm special, and I can tell you, you don't belong in the same category." And then he punches David so hard that it sets off an explosion that even Lucy was able to hear and see miles away. Lucy pleads with Falco to turn back, but he refuses. It was David's last wish, for her to be safe and fulfill her dreams. But David also had a final message. "Sorry, I wish we could have gone to the moon together." As Smasher pieces David up, his life flashes before his eyes. Every fight, every loss, every moment with his crew. He lies there, laughing and realizing that he did fly too high. He could have had a happy ending, but he couldn't stop rising, and ultimately, he lost his wings. Well, Adam ripped them off in this case, but before Adam Smasher kills David, he says that he had fun fighting him, and that David could be an interesting construct. A reference to Alt's Soul Killer program where they would turn David's consciousness into a digital copy, just like Silverhand. It's tragic. For all he accomplished, even in death, he was just viewed as a potential tool. Bro, all he had to do was just be happy and settle with Lucy, leave Night City, be happy. But no. Anyways, David just laughs and says he doesn't care. Smasher ends it with a single bullet. With the money David left her, Lucy finally makes it to the moon, fulfilling her dream and his. But there, on the moon, with the warmth of the sun, she sees David, just as she remembered him, the man she loves.